Hey, this is Chris Clews with Chris Clews, keynote speaker and author. And if you really want to learn how to level up your life, you should definitely be listening to the Time to Shine Today podcast with my good friend, Scott Ferguson. Let's level up.
Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. This is Scott Ferguson. I'm so stoked. It's going to be a rad interview. My boy, Chris Clews, leadership coach, leadership consultant, rocks the stage, fantastic author. I just finished his book, Raised on the 80's, 30 Unexpected Life Lessons from the Movies and Music That Defined Pop Culture, Most Excellent Decade. And, you know, I grew up, I was born in 1972. I grew up in the 80's. So all the references he makes resonates with me. And it's just so awesome how he takes references from the greatest decade ever and helps even Generation Ys or Zs or millennials or whatnot really resonate with them. He's all about leadership, all about leading, and encouraging, and it's just such a fantastic interview. And if you like it, please hit the like button or share it with somebody, because I know there's people out there that need to hear Chris's message, and it really helps our sponsors and affiliates as well, so I can keep bringing you some great content from fantastic people like Chris. So sit back, relax, break out your notebooks, because here comes the 80's pop culture guy, my good friend, Chris Clews. Let's level up. Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. This is Scott Ferguson. And everybody knows that my favorite time era ever was the 80's, because so much happened during the 80's. And I always say it's my favorite, decade of music and decadence and indulgence, and absolutely just fun. And there's so many lessons that can be learned there. And that's what my good friend here, and actually kind of a neighbor here in South Florida, Chris Clews, who is a speaker and author of 3 acclaimed books on work, life, and lessons from 80's pop culture. He combines areas of expertise to create a popular book series, the ultimate series on essential work and life lessons from 80's pulp culture. He's spoken to, check these companies and organizations he spoke to. He spoke to Visa, DHL, the University of Florida, UPenn Medicine, and the list goes on and on. He's like myself, a pit bull lover. We both have our rescue pitties, which is just awesome. He's built brands. He's led brands through transitions and spearheaded sports sponsorships with NCAA basketball, PGA, MLB, international soccer, and my favorite, the UFC. He's also passionate about what we talked about, the animal rescue, and donates a portion of every book he sells to Wonder Paws, which we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show as well. And Chris, thank you so much for coming on. Please introduce yourself to Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. But first, what's your favorite color and why?
Thanks for having me on, Scott. Favorite color, man. Probably blue, all shades of blue. I just kind of like, I don't know why. I mean, I see your background. Obviously your brand is blue, but yeah, I've always been a fan of blues, whether it's like a deep blue or a pastel, kind of like, Keys pastel blue. Yeah. Right.
The 15 minutes I've gotten to know you a little bit better here. It's like the blue fits it, you're kind of chill, and I like it, but still driven. That's beautiful. So let's kind of get, because I'm super stoked for this interview. And by the way, our good mutual connection, Meg Nasro, put us together. So, hey, Miss Butterflies and Bliss, thank you so much. But
yeah, thanks, Meg.
Yeah, so let's kind of get to the origins of you a little bit here. So I know you said you're from the Baltimore area and whatnot, and just kind of get the origins to it and how you kind of picked the 80's to kind of teach us some lessons.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Baltimore. I say that, the 80's were my formative years, because I was 10 years old in 1980. So now, I was born in 70, 10 years old in 1980. So from 10 to 19, that decade, everything that I did, good, bad, or indifferent, for the first time, I did in the 80's. That was my real life experience. And so I have a real affinity, obviously, and a bit of a bias for 80's pop culture, obviously. But I look at the decade of the 80's and the pop culture, and I do believe there was no decade like it before, and there has been no decade since. And I just don't think I think it stands alone. And I have a lot of reasons for that. I do kind of describe 80's pop culture as a glitter bomb that somebody threw against a wall and it exploded and all these wonderful colors came out. And that was all the individuality and the creativity that we had in the 80's. That now a lot of the pop culture we have today really stems from things that happened in the 80's.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, brother, because, I listened to a song, or my goddaughter was listening to a song by Pitbull. And I'm like, wait a minute, I know the hook in this song. It's from Take On Me by Aha. It's like, and then you start listening to another one by Flow Rider, which Spin Me Round. I'm like, Dead or Alive sang that back in the 80s, you know? So, but you're so right about the individuality and the creativity within that time. And so can you expand a little bit more how you kind of like take those times, lessons learned, and how you bring it to the stage? And by the way, squad, don't go now, but like, check out his clips on YouTube and whatnot of him speaking. He's so much fun. And I cannot wait to rock the stage with him as well.
I appreciate that.
Lessons, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. So my story probably isn't much different than a lot of people out there. Mm-hmm. There was a moment in my life where I kind of looked around and I thought, what am I doing? And where am I? And who am I? And it maybe took me a little bit longer to figure out. It was my mid 40s. I had been in corporate marketing for 20 plus years. And I still have a passion for marketing, but I was stuck. And I felt like, is this it for me? You know, I was never married and never had kids. So I always talk about how, like, you know, my footprints in the sand, when I'm gone, they're just going to wash away. There aren't these little footprints following after it. So I thought, like, who am I? Where's my legacy going to be? And is it going to just be, I was a good marketing guy? And so I'm having a self-pity party of one on my couch, as I tend to do. And The Breakfast Club came on. Seen it 100 times. But there was this line that I'd never really listened to. And it was by Bender, John Bender, the criminal. And he said, screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place. And I kind of sat up and I'm like, man, my screws have fallen out. I'm in an imperfect place. What am I just going to put those screws back in? And as Henry David Thoreau said, not in 80s pop culture, but 1840s, said the mass of men or the mass of people lead lives of quiet desperation. Am I just going to do that quiet desperation thing? Or am I going to get a whole new set of screws and a whole new door and walk out to a brand new journey? And Johnny Cade in The Outsiders said, you still have a lot of time to make yourself be what you want. I was 46.
Stay gold, baby.
Let's do this.
Right.
And I wrote an article on what the Breakfast Club can teach us about problem solving. And it just kind of took off. And from there, I sit in front of you now. I have 3 books behind me on the topic. The most recent one here, Raised on the 80s.
Yeah.
3 books on the topic. I'm a keynote speaker talking about these life and work lessons, all from just kind of having this little self-pity party of one and saying, where do I go from here? What do I do?
So what was that like moment though, that was like, dude, I'm leaving this marketing. Not gonna say it's cushy because you do work, but this kind of security and set out. What was that? You kind of dig into it, unpack it a little bit more on how you really just said, F it, man, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, that perceived stability of the corporate world, because on any Friday you could walk in, they could say, thanks very much. We appreciate all your work. So, there is that stability, but it's perceived a little bit. And I was head of marketing for a large corporation in one of their divisions. And when I started to think about what do I do and how do I do this? And so I wrote the first book, I self-published it, and I started making a plan. And I said, 10 months from now, I'm going to leave all this behind and I'm going to be this person that I want to be, which is this author and speaker. And so I was preparing for it that entire time. As one of my buddies said, you were cavemanning it, meaning I kind of pulled back. I started looking at just, taking care of the things that I needed, not necessarily wanted, but what I needed. And I started to look at how I'm going to do this. And so I was lucky enough to have a friend who was my business manager, who was in the business, and said, if you're ready to go 100%, we'll do this. And so I made that plan. And then I built a website and positioned myself as a speaker, and somebody hired me to speak. And I said, I got to figure this out now.
Yeah, man. And, I love that you weren't like, just that basically progression is when you procrastinate, it just goes away. It's the enemy of success. And I just like the caveman, I've never heard it, but I get it. It's so funny because our world has technologically just gone crazy, but our minds are still kind of stuck within those times. We haven't evolved as a mindset compared to our technology. So people will kind of sit there, get scared, or really not take the chances in life because they what'd you call perceived stability, with that. So when you get on stage, Chris, what do you really kind of bring into the audience? What are you offering, brother?
Yeah. And I want to go back real quickly. There was Oliver Wendell Holmes, I think, also said something, because you were talking about how, people that procrastinate. I think it was, I'm going to paraphrase this, but he said something to the effect of, the saddest thing is when somebody dies with their song still inside of them.
Yes.
And so I felt like I needed to get that song out, which is what I do now. And so, what do people get when I get on stage? Well, they get something fun and unique. This idea of life and work lessons from 80s pop culture. So I'm still teaching the leadership, the teamwork, the life lessons, the communications lessons, but through this vessel of 80s pop culture. So the goal for me is that I want people to walk away and retain it. I want them to take these lessons that we learned from Coming to America and the Goonies and the Outsiders and the Breakfast Club. And when they get back to their work or their life and a situation presents itself and they think, whoa, wait a minute, that's right. Prince Akeem from Coming to America taught me about this, and they have something to attach it to. Instead of just talking about it, I'm actually giving them something they can retain and they can attach it to. And then when those situations present themselves, they're like, oh yeah, I remember now. And then they apply that lesson in their life or work.
That's beautiful. So what maybe quote from the 80s stands out to you, like, above all?
Yes. I mean, there's so many. So, I mean, that one that you still have a lot of time to make yourself be what you want from the Outsiders is a really, really big one for me, because I do think that applies to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 80. That idea of you still have a lot of time to make yourself be what you want. Now you have to go out and do it.
Right.
But never forget that it's not too late. And I think that's sometimes what people forget is, well, I'm already into my life. I've got my family. I've got this, I've got that. I'm kind of set here in this perceived stability. But the reality is, like, I always tell people, if you have a hobby or a passion or an interest, something that's taking up all that really valuable free time you have, find a way to make it a living. Find a way to monetize it. Yes. Find a way to make it your career, because I'm telling you, like, you may not get all of the bells and whistles and everything that you get from that corporate world or that life that you have right now, but you are going to be so much happier. Trust me.
I love it. And there are so many life lessons from the 80s. Like, my favorite is Ferris Bueller's at the end of the movie, man. You know, like, listen, dude, like, I'm paraphrasing this, but, like, listen, you know, life goes by fast. You know, stop for a minute and enjoy, you know, that, you know, live in that present. Of course, Yoda, you know, try or do or do not. There is no try. I mean, that's how I live my life, you know, with that's beautiful. So, like, what kind of corporate events really are you speaking at, and how do they place you within the speaking dais? Meaning, like, what kind of audiences are you really, you know, getting in front of?
Yeah, luckily for me, it's all types of audiences. So just recently, I spoke to UPenn Medicine, people that are much, much smarter than me. I mean, I brought the IQ down in the room by about 70 points. You know, I'm just a big goofball that gets on stage and has a good time. But, you know, and then I spoke to a smaller group right here in Deerfield Beach of, you know, 15 people for a regional sales meeting. Luckily for me, what's great about 80s pop culture is that it's had this resurgence and its renaissance that doesn't seem to be going away. It just seems to be growing. Yes. And so it's not just Gen X anymore. It's people in their 20s that have gone down the rabbit hole of 80s pop culture because they watch Stranger Things or they listen to The Weeknd or Dua Lipa and they hear this music from the 80s and they want to learn more. Right. So I'm lucky in the sense that my message and the 80s pop culture really is resonating across the spectrum right now when it comes to industries and audiences.
You made such a great point with regards to it's back, and it really isn't going anywhere because there's so much individuality and creativity, like you said, that happened there that, you know, people, you know, one of my books that I'm writing is called Regurgitate, where, you know, basically everybody regurgitates everything, where, like, Tony Robbins kind of regurgitates Jim Rohn back to Earl Nightingale, back to Seneca, you know, or Marcus Aurelius. And it is there because it was so influential. Do you get any, like, kind of blank eyes or people that are lost when you're kind of up there speaking and kind of talking about the 80s? And if you do, they can't relate, how do you kind of turn it back into life lessons?
Yeah, great question. So the 80s pop culture is really the vessel through which these lessons come out. So what I tell people is, even if you haven't seen the movie, I give a little plot synopsis when I first introduce each movie before we get into the core of the lesson, just for people that may not have seen it. Here's a quick story, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, just to get them there. And I show some clips from the movie so that they get a real idea of who we're talking about.
Oh, I love that, Chris.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So that's really important to make sure that I do. What I find is that people come up to me afterwards, particularly in their 20s, and they'll say, you know, the 10 movies that you talked about, I've seen 5. And now I'm going to go see the other 5. But here's the thing. The more important thing they say to me is, I love the lessons. And a lot of times what I hear from the younger generations is, we're so glad our leaders were here because they need to hear the things that you were saying.
That's awesome.
And that makes me feel good because now I know I've connected with the Gen X people who are, again, typically the leaders. I've connected with them through the 80s pop culture, and I'm connecting with the younger generation, the lessons that I'm talking about, because they're hearing it and they're thinking, gosh, we're so glad our leaders are here and they get to hear this. So
that's so good. The way that you're formatting it, so that you preface the stuff and then they get it. And then I'll tell you what, you were born in 70, I was born in 72. And we're like, we would never say, oh, that movie in 1955, no. in the 80s, man. It's like how it comes. We would never listen to somebody and then go back and say, hey, I'm going to go watch, whatever, the Magnificent Seven. Although I might watch the Magnificent Seven, but
the remake was pretty good too, actually. And I'm not a big fan of remakes, but it was pretty
well done, dude.
Yeah,
that was really good. So, Chris, being a speaker and whatnot, what is your secret sauce for getting prepared to be able to rock the stage at the level that you do?
I mean, I love what I talk about. I'm so passionate about it. Like, I cannot wait to get on stage. But I will tell you, like, getting prepared, I talk about a lesson from the movie Trading Places. And Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy. And we all see at the beginning of the movie, this guy's really smart. He just hasn't been given an opportunity. He's using what he has, and he's very street smart. And he ends up getting this opportunity through if you've never seen Trading Places, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Jamie Lee Curtis out. Those of you out there haven't seen it, if I say those three names, that should be enough. It's a great
Don Amici.
Don Amici, yeah. So at one point in the movie, Billy Ray is going to his first day at this commodities brokerage as a commodities broker. And he looks up at the building and he's like, he's nervous.
Right.
And he says to Coleman, the butler, what if I can't do this job? What if I'm not what they expected? And Coleman says, just be yourself, sir. They can't take that away from you. Now, if that was the only lesson, just be yourself, that's important, but it goes beyond that.
Sure.
We have seen how smart he is. We know he can do this job. And it's the idea of, like, confident people question themselves, arrogant people question others. And I talk about that and the idea that I am confident in what I do, which is why I always question myself. And I do that before I get on stage. Are they going to like me? Is my content going to resonate? Did I package up the right lessons for this audience? Are they going to react the way I want them to react? Are they going to come up afterwards and say, we really loved it? I don't know when I get on that stage, even though I'm confident in what I'm doing. And so I think one of the things that I do to prepare myself is constantly question myself until my foot hits that stage. Once my foot hits that stage, it's what Tupac said, all eyes on me.
All eyes
and
on
it's
me,
what
baby.
Lady Gaga said, I live for the applause.
Yes.
And I really do. When I hit that stage, all that goes away. But right before, it's a lot of questioning.
That's beautiful, man. And I love it. It's not kind of questioning from a procrastination standpoint, because preparation and questioning, it can be a form of procrastination, but you are using it to level up and get yourself ready to rock that stage. That's just beautiful, man. So is after you're speaking, is there any good question that you wish the leaders would come up and ask you, but they never really do?
Yeah, I think I'll tell one story. I'll give you one lesson here that I think would resonate with everybody out there, because this is somebody everybody knows. So if you're known by one name around the world, you're in a very small group of people.
Yeah.
And so this guy that I talk about from the 80s, Prince, who will, go down in history as one of the great musicians of all time. He was the Mozart
songwriters.
of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Mozart, no question.
100%.
So in 1987, he was on top of the world already, and we still had 29 more years of his music, which is incredible.
Right.
But he'd already been nominated for Grammys, Academy Awards. He was there. Suzanne Vega was an alt singer. She had a song called Left of Center on the Pretty in Pink soundtrack.
Yes.
And in 87, though, she was more of a college radio. Like, people didn't really know who she was, certainly not at Prince's level.
Sure.
And she had a song called My Name is Luca. I live on the second floor. I'm not going to sing it because everybody
on the second floor. Yep.
Yeah, you can go ahead. You do it. I'm not going to do it because everybody will tune out. But she has a song, My Name is Luca. Prince was so moved by it when he heard it that he actually penned a handwritten note to her, which you can Google. Prince and Suzanne Vega, handwritten note. You'll see it. It says, "Dear Suzanne, Luca's the most compelling piece of music I've heard in a long time. There are no words to tell you all the things I feel when I hear it. I thank God for you, Prince."
Yeah.
Awesome. And if you Google this handwritten note, you'll see his handwriting is as magical as everything else that he did.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But there's three things he taught us with that note. One was that leaders share the stage of success. Rulers keep everybody below it. They don't want anybody on the stage taking their spotlight. Rulers keep everybody below it. Leaders share the stage. They recognize greatness and they want to share that stage with somebody else and say, hey, greatness, there's room up here for you. I see what you're doing. That's how we get new leaders.
Sure.
Through leaders being open to seeing other people who are great.
Bro.
The second thing he taught us was that encouragement doesn't cost a thing. We can all go out and encourage somebody today. It doesn't cost you anything to go out and encourage somebody you don't even know, somebody who looks like they're struggling. You can encourage them today. And the handwritten note is a lost art. Email's great. Hey, email, great job. That's fantastic. That handwritten note is a lost art. So I think in all of that, like that lesson, that question I have from leaders sometimes that I wish they would ask is, what is something simple that I can do that would resonate with my team and encourage them and let them know that I'm here for them? And I tell them, handwritten note, put it on their desk. 7:00 at night, the next day before they come in, you've got it on their desk. They come in the morning and they see this. Great job, man. I see you do a great job. I see you doing this, doing that. Yeah. Keep it up.
Absolutely, man. And it's funny that you mentioned handwritten notes, which you're going to get one from me. I always do it. You can ask any of my interviewees, they get a handwritten note from me, but I also do it if I'm networking, press and flesh and meeting people. My biggest compliment is when I walk away, they'll be like, what the hell does that guy do? Because I'm so curious. It's my curiosity is my superpower. But I literally try to get their business card. I have, when you get in my car one day, you're going to see a stack of thank you notes in there, bro. And I write it out and I drop them in the mail before I even get in the house. I 100% agree with you. So that's fantastic. So obviously you've seen the movie Back to the Future. So I'm not even going to ask that. It's one of my canned questions to ask everybody. But let's get that DeLorean with Marty, right? Let's go back to the Double Deuce, the 22-year-old Chris. What kind of knowledge nuggets might you drop on him? Not to change anything, because you've lived a rock star life in your own right, but maybe shorten a learning curve or blast through or level up, maybe just a little bit quicker. What might you share with the 22-year-old Chris?
I would say be comfortable with who you are. Right. And I would also say, if you have a dream, don't wait on it. And that's, I think, something that, now listen, I needed to be where I was in order to do what I'm doing today. Sure. I needed that experience. There was really no way for me to do what I'm doing today without going through my corporate life and going through life and having these ups and downs that I could learn from. But I would tell my 22-year-old self, because there were some things that I wanted to do that I didn't. And I look back and I don't have any regrets, but I would tell myself, my 22-year-old self, if you're thinking about doing something, go do it. You don't have to walk that line that's out there for you. Go, I know it's like very cliche to say the path less taken, or the road less traveled, but it really is true. That's what I would say.
No, Frost said it right, man. Absolutely, man. So how do you want your dash remembered then? That little line in between your incarnation date and your expiration date. Hopefully it's way down the road, but how do you want your dash remembered, brother?
I did as much good as I had fun, I think.
Bro, that is one of the best answers I've ever heard of that. And that's the thing. Fun is you have to love. Well, you say you turn that passion that you love doing and modernize it in your words and have some absolute fun with it. I love it. So, Chris, what do you think people misunderstand the most about you?
I think maybe I get a lot of the idea, like my path has been a little bit different, never married, no kids. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something very different. And people sometimes misunderstand why that ended up being my path, why that ended up being my journey. It was a choice that I made early on. It just wasn't something that I was interested in. Okay. And I had other things that I wanted to do and things that I wanted to accomplish. And so I think that can be misunderstood a little bit, because it's not going to be quite maybe as rare in 20 years as it was for Gen X, where it was just kind of the thing that people did. Mm-hmm. So I think people misunderstand that a little bit. And I get a lot of questions about it, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But I always remind people, like, we all have our own journey. We all have our own path.
Absolutely,
like, isn't that awesome? Isn't that great? Because if we all went the same way, that would just, I don't know, it feels like it would suck, man. I'd say it's like if your life was like, if you were born at point A and you went to point B in a straight line, like, I don't know, I guess that's okay. But I think it's like the peaks and valleys of life is what makes life life.
Yes.
And so that's the journey.
No,
I would say,
you have no judgmental from me. I mean, I did marriage twice, but no kids.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I don't feel that I'll ever regret it at all, because it's kind of a choice I made of how I'd like to live my life, because I've served. Well, there's a time I didn't serve. I was a vulture, kind of preyed on other people's misfortunes, but it's something that taught me lessons that allow me to serve and serve and serve now. So that's beautiful. So then, Chris, what is your definition of a life well lived?
I think, I think people, sometimes they don't define selfish correctly.
Exactly.
So
Thank you.
I think, a life well lived to me is a life on your terms.
Yes.
And I think that's what it is, because if you're living life on your terms, Ferris, as you said, Ferris, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Yeah.
That's living life on your terms.
Yes.
You're not stopping because somebody else told you to stop, or you're stopping because you wanted to stop,
right,
to look around at that moment.
Right.
Whatever looking around is to you, and it's defined differently by everybody. I stop to look around at very different things that maybe you do or somebody else does.
Sure.
But I think living life on your terms, provided that you're not hurting anybody else,
thank you,
or being negative to anybody else. But I think that's important.
I love it. Even if you look up in Webster's definition of selfish, it doesn't say anything bad. It's just, serving yourself first. And we have to serve ourselves first to serve others the most and the best. So you can't really serve other people at the utmost without serving yourself. Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. We are back, and Chris, you and I, we're definitely going to meet up. So 100% on that, but we'll maybe discuss some of these, questions, maybe at length. But today, right now, you have 5 seconds with no explanations, and they can all be answered that way, brother. You ready to level up?
Sure. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Level up. Yeah.
Chris, what is the best leveling up advice you've ever received?
Go do it. I think.
I was just going to say, just do it, man. It's an 80s thing.
Yeah. Just do it. Go for it. Like Rocky IV, go for it. I mean,
yeah. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Passion.
Love it. So, if you see me walking down the street and be like, Fergie looks like he's in his doldrums just a little bit, other than like your book, what book might you hand me to level me up?
I was just looking over at some that I have. It would probably be a book of American poetry.
Beautiful. Love it. What's your most commonly used emoji, if any, when you text?
Wink.
Wink. Love it. Yeah. Sure. Let me see. Nicknames growing up?
Oh, yeah. My last name is Clews. So Clueless, Clewser, Blues Clues.
Love it.
Get a clue. Yeah.
A hidden talent or a superpower you have that nobody knows about?
Hidden talent. Jeez. I mean, I don't know. That'd be a tough one to.
We can skip it.
Can we edit this out if I think about this for a second?
Yeah, they'll bring it back in. Love it.
Oh yeah, I guess a hidden talent, skateboarding.
Love it. Wow, yeah. Very cool. That's 80s. Love it. Chess, checkers, or Monopoly?
Monopoly, but I'd love to learn chess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Headline for your life?
He lived it.
Love it. Go-to ice cream flavor?
Mint chocolate chip or peanut butter and chocolate.
Beautiful. There's a sandwich called the Clewser. Build that sandwich for me.
Let's see. It's definitely going to have turkey, avocado, cucumbers, a little mayo, some pepper on Dave's Killer Bread.
Here you go. Love it. That sounds really good. Favorite charity and or organization you like to give your time or money to?
Wonder Paul's Rescue that saved my boy Bodie, and and Stand Up for Pitts Foundation, which we talked about at the beginning.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. And last question, I always say you can elaborate on the last question, because the question is always best decade of music, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s. But let's go with something else, maybe the song that reminds you of a high school crush in the 80s.
It reminds me of a high school crush. I mean, a high school crush, probably Crazy for You.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
By Madonna. Like you said, the one word or one name people where you had Michael, Madonna, Prince, that's awesome. It's like, damn, Prince, because he actually wrote Sinead O'Connor's "Nothing Compares to You." So
he wrote Manic Monday as well for the Bengals. He wrote Shaka Khan. Shaka Khan.
7,600 plus songs. Like you just don't know if you go through that library. That's awesome. So Chris,
by the way, crazy for you, Madonna, just a little tidbit for everybody. She's a bar singer in the background in the movie Vision Quest.
Vision Quest. Yeah, man. Yeah. Going after Shoot. Got to take Shoot down, baby.
This is the year I make my mark. I love it.
Yes. Loudon versus Shoot. Yeah. Love it. It was Linda Fiorentino back then. Yeah. So kind of dug that. Yeah. That's beautiful.
And if you like Jake Ryan, there's another bite at the Jake Ryan apple.
Yeah. It's like, you. Yeah, you. Love it. I love it. So Chris, how can we find you, brother?
Yeah, chrisclews.com, CHRISCLEWS.com. My website. You can also find me on all the socials, but at Chris Clews 80's on Instagram. I spend a lot of time there. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, Chris Clews. I also have a YouTube channel, as you mentioned. I'm on Twitter. I don't know how I got at 80's Pop Culture, but I got it. Mm-hmm. So I have that. I'm not on Twitter as much because my stories are a little bit longer than it affords. Yeah. And then also, Facebook, Chris Clews as well.
Love it. And how can people book you to speak?
Yeah, through my website, chrisclews.com. There's a form there as well. You can just straight up email me if you want at cclews1@gmail.com or at chris@chrisclews.com. Okay. So I'm very accessible and I'm ready to get on any stage.
And your let's talk a little bit about your raise on the 80s. The last book that you had, 30 plus unexpected life lessons from the movies and music that define pulp culture's most excellent decade.
Yeah, this book here. Yep. So this was a little bit different. So the first two books are workplace lessons. This was more focused on life lessons from 80's pop culture. And it was a lot of fun for me to write because talking about life, and of course, some of these movies in here are near and dear to my heart. Sure. Although I would tell you that in the second book, the movies may be more familiar to people, like The Princess Bride, Caddyshack, Ghostbusters. But this book, movies like Roadhouse, which is one of my favorites, is in here. Vision Quest, lessons from Vision Quest. I actually did a redo of The Breakfast Club for my first book because I didn't feel like it gave it justice.
Sure.
So these are life lessons. I really, really love this book. And Roadhouse has a great lesson about how simplicity rules. And I talk about the 3 simple rules that Dalton, played by Patrick Swayze, espouses to the bouncers about how they should handle themselves and conduct themselves, and how I think that really applies to our lives as well.
Absolutely.
And it's available. It wasn't the part where
no matter how big he is, kick him in the knee, he'll fall.
Well, he says, I just had 3 simple rules. 1, expect the unexpected. Yes. Never underestimate your opponent. I mean, this is just, 2 is never start anything inside the bar unless it's absolutely necessary. And that goes to work and life as well. Like if you have to have a tough conversation with somebody, take it away from everybody else. There's no reason to do it in front of everybody. Yeah. And 3rd, be nice. Yes. And I mean, that's just, and then the guy says, of course, like, well, how do we know when it's time not to be nice? He's like, I'll let you know. That's, simplicity rules.
The double douche. Remember Sam Elliott said he gets off his motorcycle.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The double douche. Yeah. I love it.
Jasper, Missouri. Yeah.
I love it. And Chris, do me one last solid and leave us with one last knowledge nugget we can take with us, internalize, maybe take some action on.
Yeah, I would say if I think about let's see, what's a good one? Let's go with The Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club. So Brian from The Breakfast Club, the brain, he's the outcast, really the outcast in those 5 kids because they all shun him because he's the smart kid, right? Mm-hmm. So they like, what are you doing in detention? But over the course of the movie, they really get to know him a lot better. And he starts to become himself. We see him start to rebel a little bit. When Principal Vernon says, I heard a ruckus, and he says, could you describe the ruckus, sir? He becomes a little bit of a smart ass. He hides Bender's weed in his pants. Like he does all these things that he would have never done had he not been in this moment.
Right. And
so what we learn in that moment is that the really cool stuff in people is below the surface. Really cool stuff in humans is below the surface. Wow. And so that's what I talk about, this idea of I compare it to the ocean. So if you're sitting on the beach and you look out at the ocean, you see like maybe a fin or a fish jump or a boat, but then you're like, I'm gonna put some snorkel gear on. You go into the ocean, what do you see? Cooler stuff, right? Tropical fish. Then you say, I'm gonna go scuba diving. You get 90 feet below the ocean. What do you see then? Even cooler stuff. The deeper we go in humans, the cooler the stuff we see.
Wow.
And so I say like that's one of the really important lessons for me. I think, that don't judge a book by its cover, but expanding on the really cool stuff in humans is beneath the surface.
Flex that curiosity muscle, man. That's awesome. And squad, I had a fun conversation. I can't wait to meet this guy and rock some stages and, just actually kind of pick his brain a little bit. He reminded us that the 80s was a formative time, not only in his life, but really to the worldwide. There was a big glitter bomb. Individuality and creativity ran rampant. He asked himself, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? Am I going to be stuck at this? But you know what? He got his asking gear and he went and found the answers within and without. So now he's a person that I really feel that's leveling up the audiences, and he's planting trees he's probably never going to sit in the shade of. He reminds us of little quotes from like Bender that's played by Judd Nelson, who I was lucky enough to meet back when I was younger. And he says, screws fall out all the time. The world's an imperfect place. And that's fine. Let them fall out, and it will just give you opportunities. It's another opportunity that if you can go inch by inch, it's a cinch. By the yard, it's hard. Break things down, get the help you need, and live your life. Do not, like Chris said in paraphrase, do not let the music die in you. Don't go to your grave with the music still in you. Get out there and let the world know, and just get out there and shine. He reminds us that confident people question themselves. Arrogant people question others. And that hit home with me because I've been the arrogant person before, the victim and whatnot, question everybody else. Once I turned inward, I was able to really, really, really level up. And he says, if you have a dream, don't wait on it. Get out there, take action, be selfish, live life on your own terms. Chris is someone that's doing it for the intention, not the attention. Although when he's on stage and he's in front of people, the attention's on him, but he has great intentions about it. And lastly, which really another one really hit home, is that cool stuff in humans is below the surface. So don't judge that book by its cover. Get to know people. Get out there. Be curious. And you never know who you could help that day. And that's what my good friend Chris does. He levels up his health. He levels up his wealth. He's humble, yet he's hungry. He can hang out in the Breakfast Club with that letter jacket on because you earned your varsity squad letter here at Time to Shine today. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. I absolutely love your guts, brother.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And stay rad, everybody.
Stay rad.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Time to Shine Today podcast. Proudly brought to you by Sutter and Nugent Real Estate Excellence, who can be reached at 561-249-7266 and online at www.sutterandnugent.com. If you are a business owner or professional who would like to be interviewed on Time to Shine Today, please visit timetoshinetoday.com/guest. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. There's a link in the show notes to our website. Also there, you will see our recommended resources. We hope that you will support our show by supporting them. If you like what you've been listening to, it'd be great if you could just give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe while you're at it. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson, and until next time, let's level up. It's our time to shine.